everyone. You're watching The Business of Law. I'm Lee Pacchia. We're talking about some really big news today. Earlier this week, the deal was finalized. Law firm Dentons has gone out and merged with 4,000 attorney shop Dacheng. It's a law firm based in China. This is a transformational event for those of you that follow the history of BigLaw. And here to unpack the monumental transaction, I'm happy to say we have Ken Zimmermann. He is consultant to law firms at the Zeughauser Group and frequent guest on this show. Good to see you again. How are you?
Hey, good to see you. I'm doing great.
This is a hell of a deal. How's it going to work?
This is a monster deal. You and I have talked about this before, and for those who don't remember, we said it's not a question of if a Trans-Pacific deal is going to happen. It's a question of when. Now it happens.
6,600 attorneys.
Monster.
Working all over the world. It's going to be the largest law firm in the world going forward.
Largest law firm by a mile, a lot of miles. Many people think Baker McKenzie is huge. DLA and Piper, huge. And they are. They have great breadth and depth globally, both of those two firms. To give you an idea of relative scale, this new firm, Dacheng Dentons, has more than 2,500 lawyers on top of what Baker McKenzie or DLA Piper has. It's a monster deal, and of course it lets the global firm take advantage of the world's largest economy now, China, an economy that's growing, although a little bit slower than it was before. It's still growing at 7%, about twice the pace of the U.S. economy's growth.
So we'll talk about the mechanics of this new firm in a moment, but first I wanted to pick up on the idea of, first mover advantage. Baker McKenzie now, they have 300 attorneys operating in China, but let's just say for the sake of argument that Dentons is really the first firm to go into China in a big new way. What are the, it's scary to go first. What are the advantages and disadvantages of being first?
There's an enormous potential advantage of being a first mover. Listen, this is the first global firm that's able to practice local law in China. U.S. and other foreign firms can't do that. Also, this gives the new Dacheng Dentons firm the ability to attract highly sought after cross-border work, including work from the Chinese state-owned entities that previously wanted to use Chinese firms but were limited by the lack of global breadth, lack of cross-border capabilities that the Chinese firms has. So the first mover advantage has great, tremendous potential upside. Of course there's risks in any deal of this size, including a deal in a relatively new legal market like China, but the upside potential is huge, and you've got to give Elliot Portnoy, Joe Andrews a huge amount of credit for what they have pulled off. Many thought that something like this might happen down the road, and these guys pulled it off a lot faster than many other firms thought they would. I think other firms are looking at this and saying, wow, now it's happened. What's next? Who's going to be next? And I think this does pave the way for more deals going forward. There's certainly interest on the part of Chinese firms, some of whom we work with, and they look at this and say, what's the next deal going to be? Who should we be thinking about? What do we need to do to position ourselves? So there's a lot of interest, and I think this accelerates that interest on the part of many firms.
I could imagine, and I'll look to you to confirm it. Did every other global Verine just scream out in abject terror when they saw this announcement come down, or was this something that you think they were expecting?
I think global firms expected that there would be a Trans-Pacific deal. It was a question of when, and it happened a little sooner than many thought it would happen. And I do think that this accelerates the interest of firms on both sides of the Pacific to do more deals like this, and I think we will see more. And again, it's a question of when, not if, but I think it's going to be faster than it otherwise would because this one's happened.
Right, so there's some big suspects out there, DLA Piper, Baker McKenzie, could do another deal. Any idea on who's going to go next? And, are they going to look for, what's the market like over there? Is there another firm that has 4,000 attorneys in China that could be a good dance partner, or are they going to be much smaller entities at the end of the day?
There's, 3 of the global 100 law firms are Chinese firms now. So there's a lot of large firms over there. And there's also some firms that aren't as large, but that are extremely high quality. And so it's going to be a question of what firms aspire to, what areas of practice they want to double down on, how important is size versus perceived brand strength. So it's going to be interesting to see who goes first on both sides of the Pacific, but there's a lot of terrific firms. Zhenghe, for example, is an extremely high quality firm there. Some have called it the Cravath of Asia, which is a huge compliment. There are others that also have very good reputations. And so wait and see, but I think this deal will accelerate more consolidation across the Pacific.
So you were saying before that China is obviously a new market. Zeughauser Group really, really knows China and how things are operating there. What's it going to be like going into not necessarily Beijing and Shanghai, but the other large 12, 14 cities in China and doing business there? Is this, I mean, it's obviously not going to be a cakewalk, but what are the particularities that you see popping up down the road?
Listen, it's a huge country. The scale is amazing. The amount of business that is happening, both going into China and out, is massive. Every dollar that flows into China in terms of inbound investment, and every dollar that flows out of China in terms of outbound investment presents an opportunity for transactional and other lawyers to advise on the deal. So all of that activity across China's borders produces opportunity for law firms. You know, the Chinese firms are very different than the Western firms. Part of the issue historically has been that they're new, that many of these Chinese firms have only been around for 10, 20 years at the outside. So it's private practice in China is relatively new. The current administration in China has placed as a very, very high priority the rule of law, and they also the Chinese government is very eager to see its law firms emerge as global leaders in the global legal industry, the same way they want to see companies in other industries in China emerge as global leaders on the global stage. The Chinese government wants to see that happen, and they want the Chinese firms to strengthen themselves, and they want them to grow cross-border capabilities. And I think we're going to see that happen. In some ways, the Chinese legal environment is 20, 30, 40 years behind where the US was, but they're catching up quickly. When we work with some of these Chinese firms, you could see it in their eyes, you could see it in the hours that they work, their commitment. They have fire in the belly. They're growing at a very rapid pace, some of them, and they have big global ambitions, and I think this is a key point. They realize that to become global leaders, to be among the largest law firms in the world by gross revenue, they realize the road to get there runs straight through the US. And why is that? It's because in the US, more money is spent on legal services here in the US than is spent on legal services in all other countries combined. And so in order to be a global leader, you've got to get in a big way into the US legal market, and that's not lost on the Chinese firms. So that and the fact that they want to grow their cross-border capabilities for outbound investment from China, inbound investment to China, leads them to be very interested in the US and European firms. The challenge, though, is that the Chinese firms are generally operating at a very a much lower level of financial performance than the US firms. It was reported that Dacheng's revenue per lawyer was in the $70,000 to $80,000 range recently, which is a teeny fraction of the revenue per lawyer range of most US firms that they would be interested in doing a deal with, and certainly a fraction of Denton's revenue per lawyer here in the US. And so that gap between the two causes them to enter into these Verein structure mergers, which have a lot of benefits because the two firms don't need to financially integrate their systems. In other words, the Chinese deal doesn't need to become dilutive of the US firm's financial performance, but it does allow them to operate under a common brand, common strategy, common technology, common quality standards, and so forth. So there's great benefits, but without some of the minuses that you would have if there was a full financial integration.
So before we jump off here, wanted to get your thoughts on some points raised by Bruce McEwen on this program a couple weeks back. We were talking about the whole notion of cultural due diligence in M&A transactions, particularly law firms. When you look at Dacheng and Dentons from a cultural standpoint, how is integration going to go?
A lot of people I've talked to here in New York over the past couple of days, including people in some of the Wall Street firms here, look at that deal and say, culturally, how in the world is that ever going to work? I think it can work, and it has worked for other firms that have grown in China, like Baker & McKenzie, like DLA Piper, others. You know, culture can be an amorphous thing, but here's kind of the bottom line that I would give you on culture. In firms where partners are happy with how the fruits of their labor, the money, if they're happy with how the money is split up among the partners, generally you have a good culture. And when partners are not happy with how money is split up, at the end of the day, you don't have such a good culture. And so I think getting that right, getting compensation standards right, getting people happy with how credit is split for cross-border referrals, getting people to feel like there's an equitable, open, transparent system around which there's consensus when it comes to splitting up the money, that's going to be key to developing a strong culture.
Well, regardless of how their first year goes, I would give anything to be a fly on the wall at their first partner meeting. That's going to be something else.
There'll be translators
right
present, would be my sense. Yeah, it'll be very interesting to watch. I give the leaders of both the U.S. firm and the Chinese firm and the other parts of that firm a world of credit for what they pulled off.
Kent, thank you so much for stopping by.
You bet, Lee.
That's Ken Zimmermann, consultant to law firms at the Zeughauser Group. If you'd like to see more of the stuff we're working on, be sure to go check us out online. You can find us at mimesiswebtv.com. You can also find us on YouTube and Twitter under the same handle. I'm Lee Pacchia. Thanks for watching.